Greetings everyone, and we're back to the next part in this read-through. I am recording these last couple of chapters in one session, so it will be easier for me to upload them quickly and on a schedule, and I hope you're enjoying them. This will be number 5 in the series, and I'm thinking I'm getting into a sort of a routine, or at least getting a bit better at it, I don't know. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. I am on Tumblr if you want to chat or see more of my art, and I am on Archive of Our Own if you want to read these stories by yourself and without me changing some stuff in the last minutes as I read them, because that's what I do, apparently. Here goes. Ghost Crime, Chapter 5. A shiver went up Danny's spine in a familiar manner, his breath becoming visible in front of him. His eyes darting all over the room and landed on a person opening the door he himself had just been brought through. The light started flickering as the killer drew his sword, and in a single graceful movement sent it flying across the room, straight for Agent Jareau's back. "Look out!" shouted Danny. He got his feet under him and flung himself at Agent Jareau, pushing her down just as he felt the blade go through his hair. It landed hard on the emergency room floor, the sword embedded where Danny had been on the bed just a moment before. All the lights exploded, sending the room into darkness as the glass shards rained down. "Stay down," hissed Danny, rolling off Agent Jareau and pulling the electrodes off his chest. He reached inwards, finding his ghost powers, as eager as always to affect his human form, and he sunk down through the floor, falling into the cellar, lights forming around his stomach, and then the phantom landed on the floor. Jennifer Jareau didn't listen to Danny. She got her feet under her, gun gripped in both hands as she turned to face the attacker. He was barely visible in the fluorescent light of emergency signs as he walked steadily towards her. "FBI, stop right there," she called, raising her gun. She saw glittering white teeth before the attacker's form blurred, and he was suddenly standing right in front of her, drawing back his sword, red eyes glowing as they caught and held Jennifer's. Fear gripped Jareau. She couldn't move, couldn't act, couldn't protect herself as the attacker swung his sword down at her throat. She found herself thinking that this was how the other girls had died before she closed her eyes. "Watch it, pal," came an echoing voice from beside her. Jareau stared at the two hands that were gripping the sword blade, glowing faintly green, and she realized that the sword too was glowing with a similar fluorescence. The killer's eyes flicked to the side at the owner of the hands. A man with white hair, glowing green eyes, dressed in black and white, with thin, skinny arms like a teenager, kept the sword inches from her throat, a determined look on his face. And Jareau suddenly realized that he was a teenager. "Let's take this outside," said the teenager, and twisted his body, forcing the sword down and away as he flung himself at the attacker. They went flying across the emergency room and through the opposing wall. The two tumbled to the ground in the parking lot, and Danny wasn't as fast to get up this time as he had the last. Pressing a hand against his injured side, he could feel the ectoplasm oozing through the bandages and his suit. The killer, he noted, got to his feet just as drunkenly as he had in the alley. "Really? You followed me all the way here? Should I be worried about you stalking me?" said Danny. He charged up and fired a ghost ray at the killer. Just as he'd expected, the killer blocked the blast with his sword and charged at Danny, swinging both parts of the cane as he did. Shields being useless, Danny ducked the sword strike and blocked the sheath with his arms, doing his best to get close to the killer. He charged another ghost ray and fired it with both hands, taking the killer right in the chest, flinging him backwards. Danny had expected that the blast would have forced the ghost out of the man it was possessing, just like it had Walker's goons when he took over most of Amity Park, but nothing happened. He just made the killer angrier. Oh crap. The killer came at him with the super speed again, and Danny felt the sword tug at the fabric of his suit as he avoided getting stabbed once more. He floated up into the air, legs turning to a tail, giving him the advantage of movability for all it was worth. The killer could fly too, and the small advantage meant Danny avoided the sword and was able to take the hits from the sheath on his uninjured side, was firing ghost rays that didn't do much more than sting the killer. Movement caught in the corner of Danny's eye, and the small distraction left his back open to the sheath strike, sending him down. Landing, Danny rolled back onto his feet. He backed up, dodging the flying killer's swipe with his sword, punching him in the stomach, sending him rolling over the parking lot. The killer came up and moved towards Danny, but was stopped by a green beam. "Stop right there," said Tucker, the fentanyl lipstick in his right hand and a fentanyl thermos in his other. Tucker's face went pale as the killer once more showed his inhuman speed, closing the distance between them, only to get blasted by another beam of green light. "You know, the world would be a lot easier if people listened to you," said Sam, a phantom plasma gun in her hand, aimed at the killer. "Nice timing," said Danny, flying over to them, popping his knuckles as he did. "Now will you leave the human alone, or shall we make you?" he asked, green glow of the phantom weapons and ghost ray illuminating the parking lot. The killer shook, and seconds later he was gone. The three friends blinked at the spot where he had just been, and then turned, scanning the silent parking lot, coming up empty. "I guess we scared him," noted Tucker, lowering the lipstick and thermos. "Guess so," said Danny, landing in front of his friends, with light starting at his stomach before splitting, turning him back into Fenton. He stumbled dizzily and gripped his stomach as the pain he'd ignored came back 3 times worse. "Danny, you okay?" asked Sam, coming up close to support him. "Oh my God, you're bleeding." Her eyes landed on the bandages that were slowly turning bright scarlet. "Yeah, this is a hospital," said Tucker, pointing out the obvious. The three turned as the door to the emergency room was thrown open, and Agent Jareau looked out, holding her gun in both hands, pointed at the ground. She was flanked by 2 guards, also holding their gun in both hands, pointed at the ground. The agent's eyes scanned the parking lot and landed on Danny and his friends. Sam and Tucker quickly put their phantom weapons back in the bags and adopted an innocent look which had fooled many teachers and parents. "Daniel, you okay?" she asked, coming over to them, putting her gun back in her holster. Yeah, I'm fine," lied Danny, gripping his stomach a bit harder as he tasted his own fear again. Jareau's eyes swept over the parking lot one more time before she brought her full attention to the 3 teenagers in front of her. "Your friends?" she asked, noting the 2 newcomers' appearance and stance. "Yeah, and who are you?" asked Sam, feeling Dan's hard grip on the back of her black coat. "I am Special Agent Jennifer Jareau with FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit," answered Jareau, a look of concern on her face. "May I ask your names?" Tucker and Sam shared a look, but it was Danny who answered. "This is Sam and Tucker," he introduced. "They are my best friends." He felt Sam's grip on his tighten for just a moment. "Good," said Jareau, placing her hands on her hip. "Then maybe you two can get your friend to accept treatment before he bleeds out." The 3 teenagers looked at each other. Whatever Jareau had expected from Danny's friends, what she saw wasn't it. "How bad is it, man?" asked Tucker, his eyes noting the bruises that were starting to form. "It's not that bad," said Danny, flinching as Sam pushed away the bangs on his head to show a shallow cut over his left eyebrow. It was bleeding again, and was mixing with his sweat tracing down his face. "You haven't even got any stitches," he said, clearly concerned and clearly annoyed with the medical proficiency at the hospital. Had he made it back to the hotel without involving others, she would have been the one to stitch him up. She'd done it plenty of times before. "They wanted to take me for scans and tests," said Danny, shivering. He felt cold, which was not a good thing. His ice core made him naturally cold, but he didn't feel cold. Sam shook her head. "We get them to stitch you up. I'd rather have a professional do it rather than my bad handiwork." "Don't worry about it," she added as she saw Danny's face. "I'll make sure that they don't do anything else. Promise." Danny narrowed his eyes at her, and she gave him a look that said he better listen to her. Jareau blinked at the teenagers. None of them were worried at all that Danny's injury might need more than some stitches. She found herself escorting them into the emergency room, while the guards that had accompanied her swept the parking lot. She couldn't help but notice that Danny barely needed Sam's support as they walked in behind her. Tucker left them, saying something about finding a vending machine, and the other 3 turned to Dr. Andrews, who were taking care of a nurse with glass stuck in her palm. "You found a runaway?" said Dr. Andrews as he saw Jareau leading Danny and Sam into the emergency room. Danny's eyes flashed with anger at the man's comment, but he kept his temper thanks to Sam's nails digging into his skin, letting him know that his eyes were glowing. Dr. Andrews pointed Danny to a new bed without any glass shards on it, and asked Sam to go wait in the waiting room. "No," she said, hands on hip, purple eyes hard with stubbornness. "You are stitching my friend up, and then we're leaving," she said, daring the doctor to make her leave. "As I explained before, we can't just stitch your friend up without checking for internal damage or a concussion. Danny rolled his eyes as he saw Sam making up her mind. It was cute the way she set her jaw, her nostrils flaring as she drew in a breath. Okay, she huffed, taking her bag off her shoulder, pulling out the first aid kit she always carried. I'll do it myself then, she said, opening the kit to reveal everything she needed. Having fought ghosts for over 2 years, getting cuts, scrapes and bruises, broken bones and infections, they had learned what they needed to treat injuries. Don't forget to clean out the wounds. I hate getting infections, said Danny, playing along. That was you who forgot to clean out your cuts last time, not I. She picked up an unmarked bottle and started twisting off the cap. Stop, said Dr. Andrews, grabbing Sam's hand, stopping her. I'll stitch up your wounds, but then you have to stay here for observations, he said, talking to Danny. His undertone made it sound like a threat. Sam's eyes went to Danny, who at the word observation had gotten a few shades paler. No can do, pal. My friend is leaving here whether you want it or not. She took off the cap. This is going to hurt, she said, leaning forward over Danny's face, pouring the liquid over the cut on his forehead. Danny hissed as the disinfectant stung, but he knew it was necessary. He wasn't completely listening to the argument between the doctor and Sam while she was cleaning out the cut, until Jareau cut in. Then how about this? You stitch the boy up and he come with me down to the station to answer some questions about the attack. One of my colleagues is a doctor. She can keep an eye on him. Sam looked between Danny and the FBI agent. Danny had his left eye closed, not to get disinfectant in his eyes, but the other one was on Agent Jareau. He thought for a moment of her proposal. He didn't like the thought of the police station any better than that of the hospital, but at least it wouldn't be the hospital. Giving the agent a nod, he decided on the lesser of two evils. Stitches hurt. Danny hadn't noticed the pain when Dr. Andrews stitched together the cut on his forehead, but had bitten down on cries of pain as he disinfected the cut on his abdomen, and then after finishing stitching that cut up, Danny curled up into a ball as the man started on his back. The man noticed that there were a lot less scars on his back than on his front. Tucker found them as Dr. Andrews put fresh bandages on Danny and handed him a bottle of orange juice. I know you prefer pineapple, but they were out, explained Tucker as Danny drained the bottle. Thanks, man, said Danny, handing back the empty bottle. Are you finished yet? He asked the doctor, who was still insisting on taking Danny through the scan, but to no avail. It would be easier getting Danny to do his homework than to willingly agree to let them put him through one of their machines. You're obviously all crazy, so what do you care about what I think? Said Andrews, straightening his arms crossed over his chest. You should eat something, and drink at least another bottle of juice. Get some fluids in you, and keep up your blood sugar. Danny got up and accepted the t-shirt Tucker offered him. Will do, he said, shrugging into the t-shirt, without his shoulders bothering him. He cooled it down enough to keep himself from feeling anything, and at the same time kept the swelling down. The three teenagers followed Agent Jareau out to the parking lot and stopped as a black SUV pulled up in front of them. An old man with a round face and short hair opened the passenger door. JJ, I thought you talked to the kid in the hospital, not bring him to the station, said the man. His voice was like Jareau's, calm and low, but with more wisdom and humor. Jareau shrugged. Where's Luke? She asked, opening the back door for Danny and his friends. Left him at the station. Told him to make some coffee, seeing as we might be pulling another all-nighter. The three teenagers filed into the back seat, pulling on their seatbelts as Jareau closed the door, jumping into the front passenger seat. You kids okay back there? She asked, looking back at the teenagers. Tucker was sitting behind the driver, Sam in the middle, digging in a bag, and Danny slumped against the door, looking a bit pale and as tired as he should feel. Yeah, we're fine, said Danny, the shadows in the car making him look older than he was, emphasizing the dark shadows under his eyes. There was a cold stillness to him that Jareau hadn't seen in many teenagers. This is my friend, Agent David Rossi. Rossi waved at the kids. I'll introduce you properly when we get to the station, she said, turning forward as Rossi turned into the Chicago night traffic. Why aren't you staying in the hospital? Asked Rossi in a low enough tone that the kids in the back couldn't hear, or shouldn't. After all, they didn't know how good Danny's hearing was, whereas he and his friend did. I don't know, answered Jareau, thinking back to how Danny had acted when he woke up in the ambulance, and then when they arrived at the hospital. She could only think of one thing. He was scared, she said. Rossi glanced back in the mirror, seeing Sam hand Danny an orange, saying something about her greenhouse. Did you notice anything else? Asked Rossi, an odd feeling about the kids, like they were watching them just as closely as they were watching the teenagers. "He has some good reflexes and high tolerance for pain," said Jareau, and glanced back at Danny, who was peeling the orange, staring out the window, the street lights flashing in his blue eyes. "The doctor think he might be using, or that he's a street fighter because of all the scars." Rossi raised an eyebrow. "What do you think?" he asked, tending to listen more to his team's profiling than others. Jareau turned her eyes to the road ahead of them, seeing a bit of Lake Michigan as a turn. "I believe they are keeping something secret," she said, deciding she was going to give Garcia a call when they got back to the station. End of chapter 5.